The cries came first, sharp, desperate, echoing through the wet pines. Two bear cubs huddled beside a fallen trunk, fur matted with rain. Their mother lay half buried in mud, ribs rising once, then still. From the ridge above, a shadow moved, lean, golden brown, eyes fixed on the sound. Sira, the mountain puma, hadn't eaten in 3 days. She'd been tracking a wounded deer when she heard them, the helpless wails cutting through the silence like pain she remembered. She crept closer, paws silent in the moss. The air stank of death and milk. One cub pawed at his mother's muzzle, crying for her to wake. The other pressed against her still chest, trembling. Sira froze. Every instinct said leave them. Rival blood. Wrong species. Wrong choice. But she didn't move. She watched until the forest dimmed to shadow, then stepped forward, slow, trembling, and broke her own law. By nightfall, the valley had 3 orphans instead of 2. Sira had buried her last cubs beneath snow 2 winters ago. Frost and wolves had taken them before spring. Since then, she'd hunted alone, a silent shape among the cliffs, sleeping where the wind couldn't reach her heart. But when she brushed her muzzle against the bear's cold flank, the scent of milk and pine tore through her defenses. Something she thought was dead flickered awake. She didn't leave that night. Instead, she circled the body once, then lay down beside the cubs. Her tail curved around them, her breath warming their shivering backs. When one whimpered, she answered with a soft, uncertain purr, the first sound of comfort she'd made in years. By dawn, they'd pressed against her chest, seeking what she no longer had to give. Still she stayed. Because for the first time since the loss, silence no longer felt like safety. Raising bear cubs was nothing like growing her own. They were clumsy, loud, and always hungry. Their scent drew every scavenger for miles. Coyotes lingered on the ridges. Eagles circled overhead. Sira hunted double, dragging down deer far larger than her frame could bear. She'd eat little, saving the rest for them. When she carried meat to the den, the cubs would paw at her muzzle, squealing with delight. She'd rumble deep in her chest, part warning, part affection. Days blurred together, hunting, carrying, guarding. Her paws split on the rocks, her ribs showed through her fur. Some nights she'd collapse beside them, too weak to move, and still the cubs would climb over her belly, tugging at her ear, alive and restless. One evening, a storm rolled in, the kind that splits trees and drowns the earth. The den flooded fast. Sira grabbed the first cub by the scruff, hauling him uphill through the torrent. The second cried behind her, water rising to his chin. She turned back, slipping, claws cutting into mud. A branch cracked above. Lightning, thunder, the smell of ozone. She reached him just as the wave hit. For a heartbeat, both vanished under the current. When they surfaced, she pressed him against her neck, dragging them to higher ground. The cub coughed, sputtered, then let out a wail. She licked his head, trembling with exhaustion. By dawn, the storm had passed. The cub slept curled against her chest, safe again. But as she looked out over the valley, trees broken, dens washed away, she knew their safety wouldn't last. The forest would soon remember its order. The strong reclaiming the weak. The scent of milk drew the hunters. Already, the wind carried the musk of male bears drifting down from higher ground, hungry and territorial. Sira stood at the mouth of the den, watching the mist rise from the broken earth, her pulse steadying. Every instinct told her to run. But behind her, 2 cubs dreamed softly, their tiny claws tangled in her fur. She lowered herself beside them again, eyes open, listening to the forest breathe. If danger came, it would find her waiting. Summer came. The cubs no longer fit beneath her belly when they slept. They followed her everywhere, up rocky ledges, through streams, across the open meadow where deer grazed. They'd learned her signals. A flick of the tail meant wait. A soft growl meant hide. Sira had grown lean again, but her eyes were bright, alive with purpose. The cubs had given her something hunger couldn't take: movement, reason, a rhythm to her days. But one evening, while hunting near the river, the younger cub, the bold one, wandered too close to a carcass. A black bear male rose from behind it, massive and silent, fur matted with flies and blood. Sira's heart seized. The male lunged. She didn't think. She launched forward, striking low, jaws clamping onto his leg. The impact threw her sideways, claws tearing her shoulder. The bear roared, swinging. The cub bolted. She staggered, fainting left, drawing him away. The air thundered with his steps, each one heavier than her entire body. He struck her flank. Pain burst like fire. Her breath came ragged, but she refused to fall. When he reared to crush her, she twisted beneath his reach and slashed his muzzle open. Blood sprayed the river stones. The bear bellowed, blinded, thrashing against the current before turning and retreating into the trees. Sira stood swaying, her chest heaving, watching the ripples fade. Then, movement. The cub crept back, trembling, his fur bristling with fear. He looked at her shoulder, at the blood dripping down, and let out a tiny sound, a soft, broken growl, half question, half apology. He pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture he'd seen her do 100 times after hunts. For a moment, Sira froze, unsure how to respond. Then her muscles eased. She lowered her head and let out a low, purring hum. Not warning, not threat, but pride. The cub's shaking stopped. His breath steadied. They stayed like that as dusk fell. Two orphans of different blood, the air thick with the smell of iron and river water, the last light flickering between their shadows. In that silence, something unspoken passed between them, a vow neither knew how to make, but both would die to keep. When the first frost returned, the cubs were nearly grown, strong, broad-shouldered, no longer helpless. Their instincts began to change. They wrestled more, roamed farther, slept less. One morning, Sira woke to find them gone. She followed their tracks to the ridge, saw them standing there side by side, watching the valley. The older one turned once, as if waiting for her. The younger whined softly, uncertain. Sira stepped forward but stopped. She knew. Bears returned to their kind, pumas to solitude. What she'd given them wasn't meant to last. It was mercy borrowed from time. The wind lifted through the pines, carrying their scent until it vanished. She watched until they disappeared into the forest, swallowed by distance and dawn. That night, alone again, she curled up beneath the same pine where she'd found them. A faint sound echoed through the dark, a low rumbling hum, almost like a purr. She listened. It came again, farther off, the call of a young bear, soft and steady, echoing her own. Sira closed her eyes, the forest quiet around her, and finally slept.